Almost idle. It's snowing. Wow. I could swear I just saw some snowflakes. Wow. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is another review video that is going to talk about the books that I've read recently. And I have a pretty good stack here. And this isn't even describing all of the audiobooks. Which, guys, look. It's the correct way. I have my camera. It's putting words the way they're supposed to be. And hallelujah. And also I can look at the audiobooks that I have read recently. Because there has been a number of them. Okay, yeah, some of them that I had forgotten about. I think the last audiobook I had shared with you was The Giver of the Stars. And I wanted to talk about the next one I finished, which was The Dutch House by Patchett. And I had heard so many great reviews about this book. And the copy, since it's an audiobook, the one that I was listening to is read by one of my favorite actors, Tom Hanks. And the story is kind of like a twist on a Cinderella story. It's this Dutch house, and there's so much about this house that is kind of magnified with a lot of, with this family, with this father. It's like his piece de resistance, the thing that he worked hard for, received, maintained, whatever you want to call it, and like his boat. You know how men are like, I've got my boat. Well, for this, it was this Dutch house that these two kids, their mother didn't like. And she ends up leaving, or, one day she just kind of disappears. And so then the sister, I think it's like really her story, told from the perspective of the boy. So this daughter ends up raising the boy up. No, I don't remember what the sister's name is. Let me figure that out really quick. Okay, so it's told from Danny's perspective, which is the boy, about his sister Maeve, or Mauve. And I think, anyway, so, and then you get the father in here, whose name is Mr. Conroy. At some point, Conroy ends up marrying kind of this woman that's obsessed about this house, named Andrea. And she brings into the picture two daughters. So you have that stepmother or stepsister plot line that enters the story. But again, it's not like this evil stepmother, which Andrea is portrayed as an evil stepmother, but she's, it was a twist in such a way that it was telling the story, but it was more like, instead of Cinderella, which would have been Maeve, or Mauve, it's the house is like the center focal point. And it's interesting to me how Danny, throughout this whole story, is like looking up to his father and wanting to be his father, and they have all these plans for him, what he's going to do, and it takes place over his whole childhood and into his adult life, because then his wife is in the picture, and some of the difficulties that brings in with the really strong relationship that this brother and sister had. And it was really interestingly done, and it's really fascinating, but it was so long and it was kind of drawn out that I began to lose a lot of interest in it. Again, there were some really interesting things especially how the author took this house as kind of the central point. But also the Sister Mauve is also like your main character told from a perspective of Danny. So it was a little Gatsby-ish there where Nick is your narrator, but he's telling Gatsby's story. So I thought that was interesting, but it wasn't like an overwhelmingly amazing story for me. So that was interesting. I did finish that up. Let's see, what else? The other audiobook that I finished, I actually finished up 2 more, was, and I don't have it on here. I know I finished it. Oh, I just have it different. Was Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. I actually don't know anything about that story. My mind always conjures up The Court's Jester with Danny Kaye, which is a movie that I watched in my childhood. And for some reason, I always thought that was the spinoff of Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, but it's actually not. What happens in the book, that long title book, is that this modern man who is in the industrial age, probably early 1900s or late 1800s, he ends up he's lazy, he's kind of a slob, he's a drunkard, and he wakes up in Camelot. And he's basically, the whole story is how he revolutionizes Camelot and that time period. And Mark Twain basically kind of told what life was like, and also what life was like for us here, and kind of meshed them. So people of the today culture would understand more of Camelot. And he kind of makes fun of some of the idiosyncrasies that they did then. But it was kind of a revelation to me within the story how Mark Twain he wasn't an atheist, he was actually anti-God, and very specifically anti-Catholic Church. He did not like the Catholic Church, and it's very evident in that book, to the point. And he kind of throws a little bit of Presbyterian, I think it is, in there, just as kind of oh yeah, we'll just be Presbyterians, as if that kind of fixes everything. But it was very interesting to me how anti-God it was. But the story in itself, it's kind of ridiculous, but it's not. And I kind of expected this Bridge on the River Kwai finale to the story, and it didn't happen in a way that I was expecting. And it was really well done. I really did enjoy learning about a lot of the things that I wouldn't have necessarily put together for that timeline or understand fully. And let's see what else. There was a lot of stuff in that book that I just took away and was like, wow, this is really interesting. Kind of had to think about it. And especially as he's bringing in his perfect world, creating this mastermind that he is in control of, because he pretty much pretends that he is Merlin. He's better than Merlin. He's the Sir Boss, is what he goes by, sorcerer. He's the master sorcerer. So I gave that one 5 stars. It was really, really good. By the way, I gave Dutch House 3, I think. It was a 2.53. It was interesting. It was fascinating, but it wasn't something that I would read again or be the first thing to recommend to anybody. But Connecticut Yankee was really well done. I thought that was very, very good. Anyway, and with Mark Twain and kind of reading that book, I ended up starting Roughing It, which is kind of my area, or he's writing about my area. He's writing more in Nevada, the Stagecoach, and he's putting in a lot of nature, science type of things, and things that I understand. Even though it's taking place in Nevada, it has the same surroundings that my own hometown area was. The desert is what it is. The sagebrush, and I've never heard a jackrabbit called what it is called in that book. And it was, it's so far, it's kind of hard to go back and forth because you're like, okay, this is a stagecoach. This is what he's talking about. And this is what's going on. So it's a little disconnected, but I think I remember Connecticut Yankee being that way, and then it just kind of all fell into place. So Mark Twain is a witty writer, and Mark Twain is his pen name. It's something Clements, I think, or Clemens, or something like that. Is his actual name, and so Mark Twain was the pen name. I also have a Joan of Arc, which I'm dying to read. Especially with his views on the Catholic Church. I think that one will be very interesting. So those are the ones that I'm doing now. Oh, and then I finished a nonfiction audiobook, and we're already at 11 minutes. Whew. I finished a nonfiction Christian living marriage couple book, which is like what to expect, or What Did You Expect? Redeeming the Realities of Marriage by Paul David Tripp. And it was referenced a lot in the current women's devotion. It's not really devotional. It's called Crown, and it's like these qualities that we need to have as wives for our husband. But anyway, that Paul David Tripp book was mentioned a lot in that, so I picked it up as an audiobook and I listened to it, and that was a 5-star read. It was really good because it was focusing not so much on trying to fix problems within your marriage, but turning your marriage, kind of like the one that I really, really like, which is Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas. Paul David Tripp takes that idea of, we're not trying to fix a marriage, we're actually going back and fixing ourselves as Christians, going back to the core and saying, okay, as Christians, this is what we need to do. Now, this is what it looks like in marriage. Okay, you have this problem, but this is what God has called us to do, so this is how this needs to mesh and put together. It was really good. I am going to say that if you want to see any of my written reviews that are kind of like fresh on my mind, I have been keeping Goodreads. It's been really difficult to do very good Goodreads reviews lately, however, because I don't have internet, so I'm like trying to type everything up as quickly as I can when I'm at like Dollar General when it has internet. It's just literally down the road for me. It's a nice 5-minute walk. So I try to type a quick review while I'm in there and social distancing, or if I'm at Walmart, again, I will try to type a quick review while I'm doing that. So they're not as great as I try to put them. Oh, you have a bayonet? Mm-hmm. Don't run with that.
Why?
Because I said so.
With this?
Don't run with the gun.
Why?
Because I said so.
Because I will hurt myself?
Because I said so. Don't run with the knife. What do you say? Yes, ma'am. And don't do it.
Wait.
Yeah. We don't want to hurt anybody.
Yeah, I don't want to hurt anyone.
Yeah. But have fun. All right, soldier. I'll see you later. So that one I took a lot from, which I think the thing I took most from, because a lot of times you read so many books and it's just like reminding you of these things, which is why when I find a really good book, I just tend to reread that one rather than constantly trying to move through new ones. But one of the things I took away from that one, especially because we go back to who we are as Christians and then what this is going to look like within our marriage, the biggest thing that I really struggle with as being a Christian is not being a lukewarm Christian, because he's hating that. He's like, I'd rather you be hot or on fire or cold. I mean, lukewarm is below being a cold Christian. I just, that has always stayed with me. And he takes that and he turns that into our marriage. He's like, you don't want to be a lukewarm Christian, whereas everything's, it's fine, and just move along. He's like, you either need to be hot and on fire and working towards this as a Christian should be. And I don't even think he bothered talking about a cold Christian, because this is not the point of it. It's not just to kind of give up and be a cold Christian or in a cold marriage. But he's like, you don't want to stay at being in a lukewarm marriage where everything's just ho-hum. And he also approached the fact that if you think everything is okay in your marriage, you tend to get lax at that point. And, all of these things can start a downward spiral because you're kind of relying on your feelings in this point. You're not relying on God, and you're not working in those areas that need working on. He's like, there is no perfect marriage. So if you're not always working on your marriage and trying to grow in that and grow yourself, then you are actually in danger in your marriage. And I thought that will stay with me. So those are the audiobooks that I read this month. And again, I'm working on Roughing It, which is by Mark Twain. So that'll be interesting to share next month for you. You know what? I'm going to get out of the way 2 DNFs. So I did not finish 2 of these books. And I don't know. There is nothing objectionable that I have with The Bookshop by Penelope Fitzgerald. It actually has really great reviews. Penelope Fitzgerald is known for rooting for the underdog, and the story is kind of about the death of this bookstore, which I was like, but and it would make sense why I would like it, but to be honest, every time I picked up the book, I could not remember what I had read, what was going on. I was constantly rereading it to try to figure out what's going on. And at this point, I was like, I'm just wasting my time. And honestly, when picking up this book, I felt like I was trying to read a book to write an English paper. There was just so many of those nuances in there that professors try to get you to pull out and pull from. And that's not why I read a book. So, I mean, it's short, it's not that big, but I'm just going to put it aside because, actually I'm going to go this way a little bit. I'm just going to put it aside. There's nothing about it that makes me want to pick it up and read it anymore, especially knowing how the ending is going to be. I'm just like, it's now a major motion picture, so I actually think in this instance I would enjoy the movie more. So I'll try to watch the movie. I have no desire to read the book, and I'm just going to pass it along. The other book that I picked up, I think I got 50 pages in and just decided I was done, is The Swans of Fifth Avenue by Melanie Benjamin. And I read this thinking that it was going to be kind of Emily from Gilmore Girls, kind of her take on life, in the sense that this is about these rich, glamorous girls in the 1950s and kind of what their life was like. Now, the 1950s is an era that I love. We talk about that typical housewife, the perfect housewife is the 1950s housewife who waits on her husband hand and foot. But there was a lot of stuff with the 1950s that was good, but there was also this idolatry with that. If your husband could either be fired or get a promotion based on how well you presented a dinner party for these people, that got a little extreme. The pearls and high heels to make a man feel good and feel his masculinity, it got too far. And it's that pendulum thing that I'm always quoting, is that we kind of go way up here and then we go way over here, and we just need to figure out that middle balance. And the 1950s had a little bit of both of that. It had both of those extremes. And so I think that's why it's so talked about and so put on a pedestal and shot down at the same time, because there was the two extremes. The housewives that were endearing and loving, and the good qualities that we loved about them kind of put us up on that pedestal, but the extremeness of it, people tend to just wipe down. All that to say, this book kind of talks about the upper class, the rich folks of that idea, but it's the reason I only got like 50 pages in, and that's what I was expecting in my head. Again, like a Emily, is it Emily Gilmore? I don't remember the mom's name in Gilmore Girls. But I was kind of expecting like her story type of thing through this. And what it is it's told through this. It's about Babe and this guy, and you get kind of his perspective. He's a writer, and it's almost like he's the writer behind Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I thought was an interesting play. And he grew up with Harper Lee, which has a different name in the beginning of it, like Eleanor Harper Lee or something. He like grew up with her. So it was starting out really interesting and stuff. And this is where I might lose a ton of subscribers, but it was told from a male gay perspective. I won't pick up a book that basically talks about adultery and you live through adultery. I just won't do it. I also won't do it for this thing. It's just not me. I can't do it. I won't do it, and I'm not going to try to desensitize myself if I am sensitive to that. It got to a point where you had 2 men in a bedroom and stuff was going on, and I shut the book and I was done. It was unfortunate because it goes into the Vanderbilts and the Roosevelts and this thing. The one thing I didn't like about it is at one point he and the magazine editor or someone a gal that worked with him in this, he kind of talks to her like, if she was my type, I would choose her. And the person looks at her, he's like, yeah, I'm choosing. It was like, I'm choosing this guy. And it was interesting to me, the choice that the author used in that sense, because I think we tend to put gay so much into they are born that way when it is they have chosen to live that way. And we do need to acknowledge that. So I thought that was interesting. Again, I will probably get backlash for that. But it's a choice. And again, I got to that point and I was like, no, I don't want to run into this again. That image will never leave my mind, and I don't want it. And again, I keep trying to justify myself like I'm not a homophobia or whatever it's called. There are things that I don't want to know. And it's easier to skim over things that happen between a married couple or someone that's going to get married. In my mind, that works easier together. It's not the thing that I'm choosing to read. And again, I glance over it, but it's easier in my mind as a Christian to go over that than it is someone that is choosing to go outside of those bounds and have an adultery. And the book is okay with this. It's not, it's not even that. It's reading about it and knowing that, okay, we're going to move on because now I'm getting grossed out. So those are the 2 DNF books that I had. Okay, now I kind of want to go on to I think this is the only, 2-star read that I've done. No, there was another one. The other book that I did that kind of is along the lines of this one, in a way, was Mrs. Dalloway. I think it's Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. A friend of mine was working on her English paper, had to read this. It was short. She was so lost. Classics aren't her thing. So in order to kind of help see what the professor was wanting, I got the Kindle book and I read it, and oh my goodness. Okay, do not like this book. The whole premise of this book is Mrs. Dalloway wants to attain this certain status, and she has this one woman that she's focusing on and kind of idolizing, that this is what I need to do to attain this image. It's one that can talk in politics, that is not that has her wealth all about her. There's everything about her that screams wealthy. And it's all of that, and this is what she is trying to attain. She puts aside one man, chooses another in order to work towards that. I think one of the themes in this book is perspective, because at one point another girl kisses her, and there's something in that she takes with her as it could be this way. A lot of mumble jumble mush, and the whole idea of that is you're getting all this perspective within a park, and then this park has different characters that bring in this story, and then Mrs. Dalloway is in with her daughter and her husband, who she thinks her husband is having another affair. Again, perspectives. When you go from his perspective, he is totally in love with his wife, helping out this other woman, and she's just basically jealous in that. It's depressing, and it was focusing mainly on how somebody would feel rather than the facts of this book. And oh my goodness, this woman, Virginia Woolf, loves to put semicolons into everything. It's like, woman, stop. Okay, you did. Oh my goodness. That was a really. It was, whatever. Not a book that I liked. It was 2 stars, and the reason it wasn't a 1 star, I didn't hate it. It's just there wasn't anything about it to like. It's kind of like a dislike rather than a hate, and so like this would be a hate insofar as what I got. So it's that one is hard to understand why Virginia Woolf is so raised up as a great authoress, because the book you get that perspective, and I feel like I'm just stumbling over my words. You won't really understand most of this until you read this stupid book, which I can't really recommend to you. It's just within that book you have another kind of story, because she switches perspectives. She has this from Mrs. Clarissa, and you have her perspective on anything, and then she switches perspective into a different person, and that person kind of shows their perspective on something, and through all that you get a whole nother subplot. And the subplot, which is interesting, is about a man returning from the war with his wife. His wife is kind of done with him. She's just wanting to be done. What he has is PTSD. And the doctor's just like, oh, there's nothing wrong with him. And this guy's just ready to kill himself. And at one point, he does kill himself. And then it ends with Clarissa saying, oh, I have everything. I finally have the prime minister at this grand party. I have a daughter. I have married a rich, wealthy man. She ends up talking politics, which is like her biggest achievement to everything, was to talk politics and be this wealthy woman that she admired from 30 years before. And everything raises up to that woman. So at the end, you have this party, everything that she has wanted and is expected and everything, and she's unhappy. And she's talking the politics and she's doing all this. And then someone's like, oh, sorry, we're late. We had this horrible case where we had to deal with this man who committed suicide and blah, 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 blah. And Clarissa, Mrs. Dalloway, goes, oh, I kind of envy him. Oh, and that's your story, folks. Be inspired. Go and change the world. Okay. Well, that was a 2-star read. That's what I was going to say. I don't remember. Yeah, this was another 2-star read. This is The Road to... I'm not even going to try to say that. It is by Scott Odell. It is about St. Francis of Assisi. Oh, boy. Okay. First of all, when it started off, I was really interested. I was expecting a whole lot more than what I got. You have your main character, Rika. I think it's Rika. Which is kind of like a noble lady. And St. Francis of Assisi is kind of like this clown, or viewed as this clown, rich, spoiled boy within the town. And she's falling in love with him. And her father's like, you're going to marry this guy. You know, that whole story. The whole feel of this book was very much William Thackeray's Vanity Fair, or Margaret Mitchell, I think her name is, Gone with the Wind. It had that feel where she has fallen in love with one guy, which is St. Francis of Assisi. She has a tutor that has fallen in love with her, and her friend, Clara, I think.